My name is Rogette Harris, and I am chair of the Democratic Party here in Dauphin County. And tonight is the first of a series that we are doing with our endorsed candidates. It's a way for you to meet them and ask your questions before the June 2nd primary election. I encourage all of you to learn more about our endorsed candidates on our website at www.dauphindems.com. Our first candidate is our current Pennsylvania Auditor General Eugene DePasquale, and he is running for Congress in the 10th Congressional District. How are you?
Doing great, Rogette. How you doing? Hopefully everyone out there is safe and being healthy and doing as well as possible.
Well, thank you for joining us this evening. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself? You've been an administrator for 8 years. So what makes you want to run for Congress?
Right, well, first of all, Rogette, thank you, and to the entire Dauphin County Democratic Party for your endorsement. It is truly an honor to have it as we head into the primary, and all of us work together to not only defeat Donald Trump and Scott Perry, but help also Democrats in the state House and state Senate help flip the Pennsylvania legislature. Dauphin County will truly be one of the critical counties for all of Pennsylvania this November. Look, my name is Eugene DePasquale, and I've been honored to be your Auditor General for the last 7.5 years. We've done everything from saving taxpayer dollars to cracking down on untested rape kits, finding 58,000 unanswered phone calls at the child abuse hotline. And even when it came to the rape kits, not only did we find all the untested rape kits, but through working with state police and the Wolf administration, we've reduced that backlog by 97%. We've had aggressive audits of school districts, including here in Harrisburg and York in the Pennsylvania 10th, on making sure that we were putting more dollars into the classroom. And as I began to debate what I was gonna do in the next stage of my life, I really felt that the next critical battles were gonna happen in Washington, D.C. when it came to healthcare, climate change, and making sure we have an economic fairness that gives everyone a chance. And so that's why I decided to run for Congress. Obviously I've got a primary here, and we're working hard on that. But Scott Perry and I in the general election, nobody will have practically. It'll be one of the starkest contrasts in a general election in the entire United States. Let me start off with 4 times Scott Perry voted to repeal protections for people with pre-existing conditions. I lost a brother to muscular dystrophy. I know what that pain is like, obviously as a human being, when I was a first-year night law student at Widener, but I also know what that economic toll can do to families. And I will fight to reform healthcare to allow more people, first of all, to give a true public option, allow everyone to buy into Medicare. For people that can't afford a private insurance plan and don't want to buy into, and can't afford to buy into Medicare, we'll automatically enroll them into Medicaid. So that'll get us to practically 100% insurance, while at the same time protecting people with pre-existing conditions. I never want any other family to have to go through what we had to go through. Climate change, I also believe, is a seminal challenge of our generation. As a state legislator, because your question I think is appropriate. I've been an executive for the last 7.5 years, and that is part of the skills I'll bring to DC. But another part of the skills is what I did as a state legislator. I formed a bipartisan consensus on addressing climate change when I passed the Alternative Energy Investment Act. We had every single state senator voting for that legislation, and only about 10 House Republicans that didn't vote for it. Of course, Scott Perry was one of them. We'll be pointing that out when the time comes. But that legislation, not only did it help clean our environment, but it also created jobs. There's 4,000 jobs in the Pennsylvania 10th District that are a direct result of my legislation, and 61,000 homes being powered by clean energy. Again, a direct result of my legislation in 2007, 2008. We also are clearly dealing with this pandemic right now. And I think we need someone with both someone that knows how to make government work better, but also with the heart to know that we have to care for our most vulnerable. And the next term in Congress, getting this economy back up and running will clearly be something that none of us would have imagined last summer, when a lot of us were making these decisions of running, not running, that type of thing. But this pandemic has exposed so many fault lines in our society, whether it's inner city minorities that are getting this dreaded virus at much higher rates than everyone else. Certainly what's happening in our nursing homes, our veterans homes, our personal care homes is downright horrifying. And it also has exposed people that can't go work from home. Look, I'm blessed to be the Auditor General. Did I work hard in the campaign, and maybe do I have some skills that, how I was able to win? But the reality is my family and I, we were able to work from home, or my son was able to do his college classes from home. We know so many people can't do that. So we've got to make sure that we're creating an economic playing field that's fair to everybody. So for so many of us able to just go work from home and still get paid, I'm not saying that that's not good. In fact, but we've got to make sure that we understand that there's a pretty big chunk of our society that doesn't have that same luxury. And we got to fight for them as well, even if they don't vote for us. So those are the reasons I'm running for Congress. Look, as Auditor General, I've held powerful people accountable, whether it was a Republican governor or a Democratic governor, and I've been tough and fair to both. So I know how to hold powerful people accountable. I know how to be both a tough and fair leader. And I want to bring those skills to Washington so that, for example, when it comes to the VA, I know what it's like. My dad, I'm the only child of an incarcerated, only statewide elected official that's a child of a incarcerated parent. He was wounded in Vietnam, got addicted to painkillers through some bad medical advice from the VA, whole host of other reasons. He ended up addicted and in federal prison. He's doing much better now, but I know how to hold powerful people accountable. And that's like, for example, holding the VA accountable that isn't doing right by our veterans. And the biggest difference between Scott Perry and me, and then I'm going to be more than happy to answer any questions, really two big differences, other than the issues, which obviously are dramatic. One is Scott always tries to get to know. If you look at his record, he's always trying to get to know. He's always looking for an excuse of why he can't lead on something and why he can't get something done. I try to find a way to get to yes. If I don't accomplish something, I'm going to tell you, hey, maybe I didn't work hard enough, or maybe it wasn't in the cards, or I couldn't get it done, but I'm going to accept responsibility for that. But I'm trying to get the yes. When it comes to infrastructure, healthcare, climate change, I'm someone that's trying to get the yes. Scott's trying to get the no. Second, perhaps even bigger, Scott is about representing an ideology, and I am about representing a district. I did it when I was in the State House. I've represented the state in a way as Auditor General, fighting for all Pennsylvanians, regardless of, red or blue or purple, whether even if they're too young to even vote. And that will be the same style I'll bring to Congress. So again, Rogette, thank you for your tremendous leadership as chair of the Dauphin County Democratic Committee. Thank you for making us one of the strongest parties in the entire state of Pennsylvania. Thank you and your entire committee for the endorsement. And also, everyone in Dauphin County, buckle up. We have one of the biggest elections in the history of our country. And all of us on this right now, are going to have a critical role to play in the control of Congress, control of the state Senate, control of the state House, and making sure Joe Biden wins this state and wins the presidency. So again, Rogette, thank you so much for the endorsement, and happy to answer all the questions.
Great. And as you kind of mentioned, we're going to have a long road ahead of us.
Yeah.
As you know, there's a lot of people that think that because the way the president is handling this pandemic, that things might be easier in November. I personally think we're still going to have to fight for every vote that we get. As you know, he was in Pennsylvania again today. It must be the fourth time this year already. But during this pandemic, as you know, things are very different. We have to practice social distancing. We can't do the canvassing, the door-to-door, the community events that we used to do. As a candidate, how are you reaching out to voters? And what's a way for voters to reach out to you and find out more about what you can do for them during this pandemic?
Absolutely. It's a great question. And look, every candidate, whether it's Republican or Democrat, we're all in the same boat on this. I want to say, for starters, as much as it is challenging for us, it pales in comparison to the challenges our frontline healthcare workers are going through, just trying to keep us safe and stop the spread of this vicious virus. Look, I think it was March 12th was the exact date where we had a campaign meeting, and we all collectively, it was my final decision. I said, look, this is going to get bad. We shifted to a work from home policy right away because I wanted to make sure my campaign staff was protected. So that was started. We started limiting my exposure and all of our exposures to larger gatherings. And obviously, it was pretty soon after that a lot of those events were canceled anyway. We have shifted from canvassing IDs to calling and texting IDs. We have pushed people to vote by mail, and we're mailing people that have applied for mail. By probably a lot of people on this got our mailer. That if you applied to vote by mail, you've gotten our mailer. So that's something that, like, we're trying to be super targeted, on how we're spending our money and our resources, while at the same time having a very vigorous texting program. We do a lot of web videos now. I mean, I've done web videos on issues. We put them up on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and we blast those out. So because I can't go to the Derry Township Democratic Committee meeting, or what name the York Suburban Federation of Democratic Women would have you, and espouse my positions. We've got to do it that way. And it's forced all of us to be creative. That's what we've done. We've been, I think, more vigilant also about making sure that we build up our Facebook likes and Facebook followers, because we know now that that's going to be a way for people to get that information. It's a way to do it for free, but it was some hard work. But when I announced my candidacy, we were at about 5,000 likes and followers. We're now at about 9,300, 9,200, 9,300 on Facebook likes, and we're at 36,000 followers. So again, that's because of our effort to boost it up, because that's going to pay dividends well beyond the primary. We also have worked hard to increase our Twitter followers. When I announced we were at about 8,000, we're at about now a little over 10,500, and we've doubled our Instagram followers. We have a website, eugeneforcongress.com. I know some people say, why not DePasquale for Congress? Come on, the last name's so long. I'm trying to save people letters. I'm trying to save people letters to type in, trying to do my part here. We've been more aggressive on emailing than we maybe would have originally thought, because again, we would have thought that we could have done more on door to door, but those simply just are not. It's not possible. So that's how we are campaigning in this, and we're going to keep it up all the way through Election Day.
Okay, great. I have a question from Chris.
Yeah.
His question is: your opponent has accused you of misusing campaign money from your state PAC to your current federal PAC. Can you respond to that accusation filed against you with the FEC?
Yeah, sure, absolutely, and thanks, Chris, for the question. Look, it's disappointing, that had happened. I get it. I'm the one with the lead, so people are throwing darts, but I get it. It's politics. But look, I am comfortable with every decision we made. We had a federal election lawyer that's been advising us the whole way, and everything that our congressional campaign is using that came from that state account, we have legally purchased that information, emails and other materials. So we followed the law. I'm comfortable with every decision we made, and I know we have reimbursed that state account from my federal account, again, in compliance with the law. So I'm comfortable with every decision we made, and certainly when the FEC, and when we actually receive it, we'll respond appropriately. But again, disappointing, but I understand it. It's politics, but I'm comfortable with every decision we made. Okay,
great. We have a question here from William that I'm going to put up for you to read. He says, due to the pandemic and the closing the air, particularly in our urban areas, he sees this as an opportunity to address redesigning busing and mass transit to be better and all electric as we come out of this. What is your platform on transportation?
First of all, I do believe that we need to, in the next Congress, have an infrastructure legislation that includes public transit. I've always said that needs to be part of it. And part of that infrastructure needs to be expansion of electric capabilities. What I mean by that is more electric portals. So buses and more automobiles can have plug-in places to power themselves, and then have more of the grid have alternative energy pumped into it, so that the energy that's fueling those cars and buses is cleaner energy. So I believe that electric infrastructure and public transit needs to be part of the next infrastructure legislation. And I am confident, look, you have to be an optimist to do this stuff. I am confident that if Joe Biden's in the White House and myself and others, and the Democrats are in control of the House, that we are going to have a very big climate package.
Okay. Next question. In the United States, people have the right to legally own a gun. but people also have the right to live their life in peace and without fear. For example, I'm sure you know of the case with Ahmaud Arbery,
Yeah.
the 25-year-old black man who was gunned down in Georgia recently, which unfortunately happens too often. What can Congress do to balance the rights of everyone?
It's a great question. First of all, I would say I'm honored to be endorsed by Moms Demand, and also the Brady PAC, because I have what I believe is a common sense view of firearm safety. I also, as Auditor General, did an audit report on the cost of firearm deaths in Pennsylvania. It is significant. 2/3 of all firearm deaths in Pennsylvania are suicide. That means that there's so many people that have mental health challenges. So clearly that's part of it. Let me give you my specific positions when it comes to firearms. I believe, and again, I think this is where the vast majority of even Republicans are, let alone Democrats and independents. I don't believe civilians should have access to military style weapons. I just don't believe that. I believe that the Congress can pass that legislation. And again, I think the American public, again, the majority of Republicans, will be not only on our side, but will reward us for doing that. I also believe that every single firearm purchase should be subject to a background check. You know, the York Fairgrounds, for example, I've talked about this before. You know, my kids were younger. They used to play at the playground right across the street. You have all of these gun shows where, again, some dealers that are Pennsylvania dealers are following the law or having background checks, but some of these out-of-state dealers are not. To me, that it's not only is it sort of in an economic fairness to our Pennsylvania firearm dealers, but it's also a safety issue. Everyone should have to go through these background checks. And so to me, those two issues, along with mental health more mental health support for people that need it, and also emergency protection laws, what are known as the red flag laws. I think Congress can address that in a way that doesn't infringe on people's Second Amendment right.
Great. I have a question from Jack. Jack wants to know if you feel it was political payback by the General Assembly Republicans to dramatically reduce the last two budgets, resulting in severe staffing shortages in the Auditor General's office, especially to conduct special investigation audits.
Jack, it is a great question. I am not a mind reader. I am the Auditor General. However, I will give you my opinion on that. The chances of that having nothing to do with politics is zero. Zero. There's no chance that that was just on the merits, because there was only one line item in the entire state budget that had a cut beyond a couple dollars, and that was my department. They cut $4 million. That was political retribution, because I don't play by their rules. I'm looking out for taxpayers, I'm looking out for waste, and I'm calling it like I see it, and they don't like that. And I wear that cut as an absolute badge of honor. We are still aggressively doing my job as Auditor General. You know, we're still being tough and fair, auditing even the governor's waiver process today. And even today, we talked about how we're going to look at legislative correspondence to see whether the legislature was trying to play politics on who was getting granted waivers. And I'm not going to be pushed around by these people. But whether it's Democrat or Republican, but the chance that that was not political retribution is absolutely zero. I wear that cut as a badge of honor. I am not the Auditor General, nor am I running for Congress to please a bunch of insiders in the Capitol Dome. I'm running to fight for you.
Great. Well, here's a light question for you. As you know, running for office, you have very long days and longer nights. So what's your comfort food on the campaign?
Look, I am, as people that know me well know, I am a fitness nut. So what is my comfort food? This will not be the most glorious or glamorous answer, but I do love it. There is nothing quite like a Friday night with the kids, Star Wars movie, red wine, pistachios.
I see you have a Star Wars poster in the back.
One of the advantages of this is that people have gotten to see, no, I'm not kidding. I'm that big of a fan.
Which one's your favorite movie?
Well, my favorite is Empire Strikes Back, for a host of reasons. We're more than happy to. I can talk about that for the rest, but Empire
Yes.
Strikes Back is my favorite for a host of reasons. But there's only about two of them that I really didn't like at all, and that was episode 2. I thought was, admittedly, I got to tell you, I thought it was horrible. Quite frankly, I'm embarrassed by it. Episode 1 and the solo one, I was like, The rest of them, I love them.
Okay. Okay. Great. So I can kind of understand this next question because as chair, I come across this myself many times. We see this play out a lot, especially on the federal level. You see a lot of your Republican senators and congressmen just sort of go along with the president, whether he's right, wrong, or indifferent, just because they're all Republicans, just going along with the party. And I know I've come across this as chair, when sometimes your party expects you to do one thing, even though you personally think something else is better for who you represent. So this question is, if elected, will you be an independent voice for your constituents, even if it goes against the wishes of your party leadership?
Excuse me. The short answer, let me start off, was yes. My job is to represent the district, not a political party. Certainly, I'm a Democrat. I'm proud to be a Democrat. Most of my, the traditional positions you would think of as a Democrat, abortion rights, LGBTQ issues. Certainly, I mean, I am proud to be a Democrat on just not those issues, but union rights, etc., climate change. However, there are times where, you've got to buck the party because it's not in the best interest of your district with what they're pushing. Look, you've seen how I've operated as Auditor General. And look, I support most of the governor's agenda as a Pennsylvanian, but as Auditor General, there are times I had to hold Governor Wolf accountable. And that goes with the territory. And the same thing, I'm sure, will happen whether it's a Biden administration or even the House Democratic leadership. When I was in the legislature, and I'm going to tell you, people can go back on this. It was, I think, the 2009-10 session when Governor Rendell had an agreement with Senate Republican leadership on an arts task or arts tax. I'm sorry, arts tax, TAX. I was one of the biggest fighters against that. I thought it would have been horrible for York City, and the surrounding areas, which was my legislative district. Arts was a big part of York, the 95th district. And so I fought it with everything I had, and we beat it. And when they didn't tax smoke, and one of the things I said was, in that, and again, we had, and Governor Rendell and I, we had a, very frank discussion, and, he knew where I was coming from. I knew where he was coming from. But when they had that deal, one of the things I went on television that night and said, we're going to tax the arts, but we're not going to tax cancer, because the Senate Republicans specifically let out smokeless tobacco as part of that deal. So to me, I'm like, why are we going to not tax cancer and we're going to tax kids going to York Little Theater? It made no sense to me. But that was something where I was taking on the deal that my own party's governor helped orchestrate. And guess what? We won that battle, and that arts tax never went through. And so I've shown the ability to do that.
Great. Well, that kind of goes into the next question then from Nicole. What are one or two issues right now that you feel you could work with the Republican Party on?
Yeah, I'll say this, look, I am hopeful that if I am a member of Congress, when I'm a member of Congress, he won't be in the White House. But I know one area that I feel I could work with President Trump on, and Republicans in general, is trade. Look, I think we've got to rebuild our alliances across the world. No question about that. But I do think that presidents of both parties have been too soft on China when it comes to trade deals. So that's something I think they've been stealing our intellectual property. And that's something I certainly could work with if there is a second Trump administration, certainly Republicans on that. And I think also infrastructure is another area where I would be more than comfortable working with. Again, I hope he's not there, but a second Trump administration and Republicans in general as well.
Okay, great. Do you believe there is a legislative means to improve workplace diversity?
Well, certainly I think there is at the state level, and I think it can apply at the federal level as well. Pennsylvania is one of the few states that does not have protections for people that are LGBTQ in the workplace. you can still be fired in state in employment in Pennsylvania for being LGBTQ. I think that's unacceptable. I co-sponsored a bill that would have changed that law when I was a legislator and still support it. I believe something like that can be done at the national level. And I also think, but I know you've got to do it where the interstate commerce clause has a role in that. But I do believe that that's something that can be done. And I certainly think in areas of federal government employment, more can be done on diversity as well. One thing I will say is that if Joe Biden is elected president, I will be very clear that he should have a cabinet that looks like America. There should be many women, I would say, if not even, and again, I'm not don't want to put the exact number, but it should be at least half of the cabinet should be women, and there should be a significant amount of Hispanics, African Americans, and there should be some certainly some LGBTQ. Again, we want everyone to be qualified, but if you are intentional about your hiring, you can find a way to make that cabinet look like America. And I think it starts with that tone from the top, and then you work from there, because the federal government workforce is a significant employer, both in the district, in Pennsylvania, and across the country. And that's certainly something that a president and the Congress can have significant influence on.
And I'm glad to hear you say that, because you have a lot of groups, particularly African Americans, who feel as though sometimes their votes are taken for granted.
Right.
You don't see African Americans in high level leadership positions all the time. So that's why I'm glad to hear that you believe that there is a way to increase diversity so it does look like America.
And look, I don't want to guarantee anything, because look, at the end of the day, the president makes these appointments. But look, when you have the U.S. attorneys for Pennsylvania, you have a lot of these district, because each department has leadership roles that'll be in Harrisburg and Philadelphia, Erie, Scranton, and Pittsburgh. Those are also other opportunities to have a more diverse pool as well. I do not believe there has ever been, and again, I want to say this to clarify, I'm not 100% sure. I don't even think there's ever been a female, let alone a minority, U.S. attorney for the Middle District of Pennsylvania. And again, I'm not here to tell you that I can guarantee that Joe Biden would do that. But I'm just saying that's another area where these tools, where this can be reflected.
Right. And even in Congress and the U.S. Senate, last year there was a study that came out that there was only one African American chief of staff in the entire U.S. Senate. So
that's important.
A lot of places.
And by the way, so when I was a state rep, my district office, actually including my Harrisburg office, was all female, and it was 2 African American, 1 Hispanic, 1 white, but all female. Now, I'm not going to guarantee every position. Obviously, I got to win. But one thing I will tell you is my team, both in DC and in the district offices, and I say district offices because I don't know how many I would get. Yeah, I got to figure out what the budget would be, et cetera, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there. It will look like the district. It will be diverse, including language diversity, because if you do not speak English, and again, I know this sometimes is a controversial topic, but if you call the district office and you need help, our job is to find a way to help you. So I will have, just like I was a state rep, we had a bilingual staff member. The same thing will happen as a member of Congress.
Great. And that's a great point about language barriers. A great point. I put another question up from William. He wants to know, what committees would you like to be on if elected?
Yeah, it's a great question. And one of the things I say this with, understand, I want to talk about committees that I believe I can have an impact at the beginning, and also somewhat realistic. So understand when I'm giving you this answer, I think it's with a touch of realism and also where it can have an impact. I want to be on transportation, Veterans Affairs, and something to do with the economy and the environment. So those are going to be my bigger asks. And I think at least 2 of those asks will be attainable.
Okay, great. Here's a question I'm going to put up from Laura. Pennsylvania has a lot of empty factories. Do you think manufacturing could have a renaissance in this area if we could entice more companies here?
I think obviously the answer is yes. I think it's also important to think about what type of companies we're trying to recruit. And look, this is mostly a state issue. I'm not a big fan of a lot of these incentives where states compete against states and throw these throw all this money at companies and they end up just playing the taxpayers for fools. I don't like that game, but I know some of it happens. But I do think that we've got to do a better job of reutilizing sites that have already been existent, as opposed to taking away green space in some of our more suburban and rural areas, utilizing infrastructure that already exists. But I think our primary target should be clean energy companies. I think that's a great way to help our environment and help our economy. And it's a way to put union members back to work.
Very true. This is a question from Davis. What is the difference between you and your primary opponent?
I think the biggest difference is that, look, I have a track record of getting stuff done. You look at just my job as Auditor General, cracking down on waste, cracking down on the untested rape kits, cracking down on the child abuse, unanswered phone calls at the child abuse hotline, holding even Democratic school boards accountable. You know, I've had a very tough audit of the Harrisburg School District. That's an entirely Democratic school board. Same thing in Scranton, same thing in York. I even stopped a property tax increase in Pittsburgh when we find that there was plenty of money and they didn't need to do that. So that's something that is part of my track record. The other part of this that I think is important is my time as a legislator. The Alternative Energy Investment Act, that was 6 months of putting together a bipartisan consensus and actually getting something done. Led the fight to increase investments in basic education. When I was a state legislator, we put art and music back into the schools in the New York City School District. They had been taken away. I fought to put them back in. Again, that's actual accomplishment. And even when Tom Corbett was governor, I didn't stop working as a state house member, and my bill to ban texting while driving was actually passed into law when you had a Republican governor, which shows I can work with even leaders of both parties as well. And I think what is most important for us as Democrats, look, this is all an intellectual exercise unless you can win. And in 2016, I was the only Democrat that carried the Pennsylvania 10th District, the only one. That means I had a lot of crossover votes. Donald Trump won this district by 9 points. I won it by 2. That was in a bad year. So that means I can carry this district. And part of this, again, I want to be clear about it campaigning. We're closing in on $1.2 million raised. We've been endorsed by every single union, Planned Parenthood, all the environmental groups, League of Conservation Voters, Clean Water Action, Moms Demand, Brady, when it comes to common sense gun safety legislation, and a track record of knowing how to get votes, knowing how to run a campaign. So my background, what I've been able to accomplish, and my ability to win, I think separate me not just from my primary opponent, but practically any other Democrat in Pennsylvania when it comes to the Pennsylvania 10th District.
Okay, great. You mentioned your interest in the economy if elected to Congress. As you know, the coronavirus has not just health implications, but a lot of financial implications for those who are unable to work. I'm sure you saw the recent numbers this week that over 35 million people are unemployed at this time. And that doesn't count the ones, as you mentioned in your opening statement, who's working part-time, at home, things of that nature. There was a stimulus package that was bipartisan that was passed. As you know, not everyone received the $1,200 check. Even those who did, that's not enough to sustain you for 2, 3, as however long this lasts. The Democrats have another stimulus package bill that they're hoping to pass. My question to you is, as you know, a lot of the small businesses that were supposed to receive those loans did not.
Right.
The larger corporations that frankly don't need it as much did. And since with your background as an auditor general, what could have been put in place to ensure that people who needed that money are the ones who actually got it?
This is an issue that I think is critical, and I've done some posts about this before that some of you may have seen. This is where, like, for instance, if this was moving through and I was a member of Congress, you have to start right away before the train is coming out of the station asking, okay, how are we defining small business? How are we going to make sure that this is going where the desired help is needed? I think the vast majority of Americans supported it when they heard about it because they're like, okay, I want small businesses to get help so they don't go under. Then we find out Shake Shack, some of these bigger hotel chains, even the LA Lakers. Again, not sitting there just to criticize the LA Lakers as a basketball team. I could quite frankly care less. I even like LeBron. But the point is, they shouldn't have been getting that money. Meanwhile, we've all probably know somebody that's a small business owner that's had to clearly shutter their doors now because of that. So that starts with reforming the SBA to actually make sure the money is going to actual small businesses. SBA counts you as a small business if you have 500 employees or if you're at a certain gross income level. And we know if you've got a clever accountant or a clever lobbyist, you can make those numbers look whatever you want. And that's where you have to start with the reform. Once the money's out the door, the bureaucrats that are approving those loans and grants, they're just following the rules. You've got to start with reforming the SBA to make sure that actual small businesses can get that. And look, in some of them, and I don't want to mention their names because they've told me this, the application process is so challenging that if you truly are a small business and you don't have a lobbyist or a law firm doing the application for you, you're just, you can't comply with all the rules. That's got to change.
Here is a question from Laura. And you did touch on mental health, but she has mental health care is a big issue worldwide these days. What could you do in Congress to get more attention paid to the severe shortage of psychiatrists and therapists?
Yeah, and this comes back to even our audit of gun safety, cost of lack of gun safety, firearm deaths in Pennsylvania. A big problem, and it's all over the United States, is mental health. One of the bigger challenges we have is access to mental health care in rural Pennsylvania, and I'm sure rural America. So I am open to ideas on how to do that, but that is a problem that must be addressed. There's two things to address it. Number one is make sure the access to the care is there. Two, we are better now than when a lot of us were kids on the stigma. But let's not kid ourselves, no pun intended on kid, that the stigma is still there for so many people on getting the help. Look, some of us that are blessed not to have significant mental health challenges, I'm going to say this, I used to think this. I'm going to be honest about this, but not now. Oh, just pick yourself up by the bootstraps. Just suck it up. I now know from talking to so many people that have had these mental health challenges, and certainly people that are the professionals in the field, this is the equivalent for many people, just like if you have some type of illness, taking medicine to deal with the illness, getting the help you need. So we've got to make sure we continually to work to break the stigma, letting people that need the help know that there's help there, and also particularly in rural America, making sure there's greater access. And that obviously includes mental health parity, certainly in our insurance laws as well.
Great. Here is a question from Marlene, and I put it up on the screen for you. Please comment on the new policy that the U.S. Department of Education Secretary Betsy DeVos put out on sexual assault on campus.
Yeah. First of all, the chance of me agreeing with anything Betsy DeVos has to say, if she told me today was, Sunday, I would believe her. But if she told me I was on the Dauphin County Democratic Party live town hall, I'd begin to think I was in Cumberland County, because I just don't trust anything she says. For starters, as Auditor General, we audited our state system of higher education, and we looked specifically and found that they weren't complying with a lot of sexual assault policies. And so we helped reform that with them. And so now all students are better protected on our state system campuses. Of course, they're not in school right now, but when they were, and certainly hopefully when they go back. The Betsy DeVos plan puts the burden on the victim, and that is unacceptable. I think it is, in a sense, I don't know why they're doing it. I don't want to read minds on this. Let me just tell you this. I oppose what they're doing. I think it puts the burden on the victim and not on the alleged assailant. And people that are victims of sexual assault, they need to be at a minimum listened to and given a fair hearing on what their concerns are. And the Betsy DeVos plan will make that incredibly harder. And I would oppose it with everything I've got.
What are 3 things you would like your constituents to know about you?
I'm tough, honest, and fair. When I say tough, I'm not talking about getting in some MMA ring. I mean, I'm not stupid either. I mean, I'm not getting in with some of those fighters. But when I say tough, meaning I can stick to my guns if I think everyone else is wrong, and political consequences be damned. Honest, look. You see my role as Auditor General. I call them like I see them. And fair, I'm not out to just embarrass people. When there were times when Tom Corbett was right, I said it. When there were times he was wrong, I said it. Same thing with Tom Wolf. And I'm not out to just embarrass people. That's how so I would say those 3 traits: tough, honest, and fair.
We're not used to candidates being so short with their answers. Got right to the point there. In 2016, as we know, Russia interfered with the election. If you were in Congress, what would you do? If you were currently in Congress, what could be done now to start to prevent that from happening again this year?
I say this somewhat tongue-in-cheek to start. I saw something on social media a little while ago that there is now a Sbarro's in Moscow. And I'm like, oh, we're finally fighting back. We're sending them our junk food. Because I cannot stand Sbarro's. It is so greasy and disgusting. I can't handle it. When I saw one of those in Moscow, I'm like, oh, we're fighting back, finally. Look, we have to treat this what it is, which is this is a never-ending battle. And it's not just with the Russians. There is a never-ending arms race, so to speak, to try to get our information, invade our privacy, hack our elections, and try to disrupt our democracy. We've got to beef up our election security systems. We have to constantly deal with the threats to our national security and constantly working to protect the privacy of Americans all over the United States. So when it comes to that type of election security, I'm going to listen to the experts on the best way to do that. But I'm also going to take those threats seriously and not pretend like it's not happening like some elected officials have.
Right. Student loans, most of us have them. What can Congress do to help with that student loan debt, especially at a time now when the jobs aren't there to help students pay it down?
Not only do I still have them, but I'm also have a son with them too. And soon enough, it'll be a daughter with them as well. So believe me, I know all too well, though.
I have them too.
Yeah, the list is long and distinguished of who has them.
Yes.
So let me start off with saying this. People that are struggling right now financially, there should be a reprieve, at least freeze them in place on their payments and not have their credit rating damaged while this pandemic is going on. That should absolutely happen. Moving forward, I think there's a couple of things that could easily be done. I think, first of all, we need to make our public universities more affordable. Pitt and Penn State, for example, are first and third in the nation for in-state students in the cost of tuition. That's unacceptable. So we've got to make our public universities more affordable. Then we need to force a renegotiation of all existing student loans down to a much more manageable interest rate, something around 2 to 3%, and then allowing, and when I say allowing, every single person to refinance that under the new existing interest rate. I think that would go a long way to making so if we do both, we make our public universities more affordable and we force a renegotiation with lower interest on the student loan debt, I think that will do wonders for the economy and help people manage those payments and help the next generation get through college and not have such a crushing student loan debt.
Here's a question from Kate. In its first 2 years, the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program denied loan forgiveness to 98% of applicants. How would you address the failures of this program to date?
Whenever you see, first of all, it's a great question by Kate. Whenever you see something that is a 98% failure, clearly there's something wrong with the program. it can't be all the applicants. Something's wrong with the program. So I want to work with people that have both experienced this rejection and also the federal loan office that's managing this to really dig at what is happening, why is that happening, and why are the policy goals not being met.
Before I go on to the next question, I just want to thank everyone for sending such great questions. Keep them coming. And don't forget to go to our website, dolphindems.com, to learn more about Eugene and the rest of our endorsed candidates. Here is a question from Patel, and you did touch on this earlier, but he would like to know a little bit more deeper where you stand on the LGBTQ rights.
The short answer is it's 100%. I've already been endorsed by all the LGBTQ groups that have actually endorsed. I think there should be full protections in the workplace. I was the first statewide elected official to support marriage equality. And when it comes to the military, I think President Trump was wrong. I think our transgender soldiers should be allowed to serve, and I will certainly fight for legislative protection if we're in a situation where President Trump is still in office. So if there's other follow-up to that, I'm happy to answer that. But certainly workplace protection, higher education protection, basic education protection, K through 12, and certainly in the military as well.
Do you support expanding programs such as family leave?
Yeah.
Of that nature?
I think we should have paid family leave, absolutely.
Well, that comes to the end of our questions. Is there anything else you would like anyone to know about you, or would you like to give a closing statement or anything of that nature?
Look, first of all, let me start off with Rogette. Again, thank you to you and your entire leadership team for running such a great party and for the endorsement. I want to thank everyone for giving up some of their evening tonight to hold me accountable like I hold other people accountable, asking me these very tough but very fair questions. Look, this election is critical, not just the congressional race, but certainly at the national level with the presidential election. You've seen me in action for many years as your Auditor General, and some of you even as a state legislator. What you see is what you get. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to try to build as a member of Congress on my accomplishments as Auditor General and as a state legislator. I also want to, on the political side, continue to help build a vibrant party here so that we can have more Democratic wins down ballot as well moving forward, not just this year, but moving beyond. But the thing people should know about me is I'm going to work as hard as any human being possible, not just to win, but to make sure that every single day, you know, you've got a member of Congress that is fighting hard for the district and fighting hard for you. And that's something that I take very seriously. Every job I have ever had, I have taken seriously. When I was a Little League umpire and I was on the road, meaning it was the visiting team and the home team, the home parents were getting mad at me because a close call went against the home team. I never let that affect my judgment. I'm always doing what I believe is the right thing. And you know, sometimes people are going to agree with that. Sometimes they're going to disagree with that. But as your member of Congress, that's the type of values I'll take into it every single day. And we need someone who's actually going to fight for us, not for an ideology, but also someone with a track record of getting stuff done and who can win. And with your nomination, I believe we can win the general election. I believe we can change the political dynamics of South Central Pennsylvania for a generation and address the priorities of economic fairness, climate change, and healthcare reform in a way that reflects our values, helps move our region, our state, and our country forward. And I look forward to that challenge of not only winning the primary, winning the general election, but even more so, I look to the challenge of actually doing the job every single day. I'm itching to do the work. That's why I'm doing this, because I love the work.
Well, I thank you for joining us, but one last question came in at the last minute.
Sure.
It's about disability rights. And that's a broad topic. You have physical disabilities and everything else. But where do you stand on that? And where do you think, as a congressman, we can improve on, increasing accessibility for those with disabilities?
Look, for starters, I had a brother who had muscular dystrophy, so I lived firsthand with what the world was like pre-Americans with Disabilities Act. When it came to having a brother with a wheelchair, just trying to get to school, let alone other activities. But look, when it comes to this disability community, whether it be mental health or physical health, we need to make sure that everyone has access to the care they need, the services they need, for our most vulnerable, and also making sure that they have access to the health insurance they need. Under Donald Trump and Scott Perry, they've several attempts tried to get rid of those protections for people with pre-existing conditions. I'll fight that with everything I've got. The mental health and physical health community will have a strong friend with me as a member of Congress.
Well, thank you for joining us. I'd just like to remind everyone that Eugene is our endorsed candidate for Congress. And I can personally say, as a statewide elected official, you've always been accessible to not just the party, but to your residents, to your voters, the people who elect you. And I have no doubt that when elected to Congress, you will stay the same, which is a great quality to have, that we see you outside of just election time. So
well, thank you, Rogette. And by the way, not obviously Congress is a big job, but if I can be responsive representing 12.5 million people, I can do it on representing 750,000.
Yes, yes. So again, thank you for joining us. Would you like to tell everyone your website and where they can reach you?
Absolutely. So the website is eugeneforcongress.com. I also have a Twitter handle, which is at DePasquale PA. We have a political Facebook page, which is, what is it? I think it's Eugene A. DePasquale. That's my middle initial, is A. Instagram is Eugene_DePasquale. So we're just throwing Italian vowels at you nonstop with that.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. And yes, Laura, this video will be available later. You can find it on the Dauphin County Democratic Committee's Facebook page. And again, to read more about Eugene and the rest of our candidates, please go to dauphindems.com. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Rogette. Thank you to everybody. Have a great night and stay safe.
You too.